Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Flex podcast presented by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Samantha Praviti. Every Tuesday here on this podcast, I'll be joined by a luminary from the fantasy football community for a fast-paced round of 21 questions where we will discuss all things fantasy for this NFL season and so much more. On today's episode, I am joined by the one and only Benjamin Allbright, reporter, Broncos insider, and host of Broncos Country Tonight, who you can find on Twitter at Allbright NFL. Welcome to the Fantasy Flex, Ben. How was your week one?
My week one was pretty good. I'm going into Monday night with a 26-point lead, but I'm up against Lamar Jackson, so I'm on some shaky ice there.
Yeah, that's definitely tricky, especially since they have no running backs. So I feel like he's going to definitely do some damage on the ground, especially against a Las Vegas run defense. But yeah, I mean, you could definitely pull it out. I believe in you.
Here's open. Fingers crossed.
Any major takeaways from the Broncos game that you can share with us?
I think things went mostly as I'd expected. I mean, Melvin Gordon got the lion's share of the yardage and targets and all that. Now they went to Javonte Williams when they were salting it away, so he actually got more carries in the end. But the reality was it's about a 70-30, 60-40, somewhere in there split for, Melvin Gordon is running back one there. And that's not to say that Javonte isn't good or whatever, but they plan on easing him in and he'll take over next year when Melvin Gordon walks. With Jerry Jeudy out, probably gonna be out about 6 to 8 weeks, from what I'm told. That means that Cortland Sutton's got to step up. Didn't have a big game there in week one, and that should be a little concerning because Jeudy had the chemistry with Bridgewater and Cortland kind of didn't. So you're gonna need Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, and Cortland Sutton to step up. They did see kind of a connection between Fant and Bridgewater, so I think Fant going forward looks like a good option there. And Teddy had a heck of a game. I mean, that's better than Teddy's, I think, ever done. Actually, I think that's his highest quarterback rating in a game ever, if I'm not mistaken. So, we'll have to go back and look at all that. But, off to a promising start against the Giants defense is not maybe as bad as the Broncos made it look.
For sure. Yeah, it was a little hard to watch as a Panthers fan. Obviously, we didn't get that Teddy last year, but awesome to watch, obviously, as a hometown thing. All right, Ben, let's just jump right in. Question one is, what year did you start playing fantasy and did you win your first league?
I did win my first league. I started playing fantasy football in 1999. I believe that was the first year it was offered online at Yahoo. I may be wrong on that, but
wow.
That was the first time I played. I was the first overall pick in the draft, and I drafted Peyton Manning, and it worked out for me. So yes, the first year I played was 1999, and I did win that league.
Awesome. What are the best and worst parts about playing fantasy football for you?
The best is, you got a rooting interest in a lot of games that you may not have a rooting interest in. I think the worst is where you're sitting there with a case of the tight cheeks, after you, with like 4 minutes left in every game, and you're like, okay, just run the ball out. Don't let them get the ball, and you're rooting against it. It creates this convoluted mess of mental gymnastics. Where you're trying to root for certain things and against other things. And if you're the kind of person who puts a little money on games as well, it can make that a bit of a bugaboo. So, I mean, it's all in good fun, but yeah, I think that's the most stressful part.
For sure. I love the rooting interest part. It makes games like a Thursday night Jets Broncos game exciting. But yeah, it is very stressful. That mental gymnastics thing that you said is definitely how I think about it. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I need this team to score this, but it can't be from this guy. And Matt Ryan's going to throw to this guy. And it's, because I've got like 8 teams plus picks and everything. So yeah, it definitely can get pretty convoluted. All right, jumping right into the football stuff. We are going to kick it off with a quick segment called the Burn Book, which is of course a Mean Girls reference. As fantasy managers, it is so easy to have recency bias, especially if a player has burned us either due to injuries or a bad week. So we are going to run through 5 players, and I want you to briefly tell us how confident you are in that player moving forward, or if they are in your burn book. So the first one that we're going to talk about is Aaron Rodgers. His week 1 performance was mega cringe. It was 15 of 28 for 133 yards and 2 interceptions, 0 touchdowns. It is a far cry from what we saw last year in Rodgers' MVP campaign. We actually ended up seeing Jordan Love for the first time. Is one flop enough to land Rodgers in your burn book? And did the Broncos dodge a bullet kind of, or do you think he'll bounce back in next week against the Lions?
Well, in keeping with the theme, I think that Aaron Rodgers will fetch a better performance in week 2 and going forward. I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers, until I see like a month or 6 games of him like that, back to back to back, then I'm writing him off. But at this point, I'm not writing him off at all. I still think he's still got it. I just think he's a little rusty. He wasn't there for the OTAs, and all that kind of stuff, all the offseason distraction stuff. So I think I'm still behind Aaron Rodgers in this one, and we'll see going forward. The Packers have had 4 or 5 road just belly flops like that since LaFleur's been their coach. So it's interesting to note.
Definitely interesting to know. It was really hard to watch, especially as someone who has lots of exposure to guys on the Packers. So hopefully he can turn it around against the Lions. That's obviously a great bounce back situation. All right. The next guy we're going to talk about is Matt Ryan, another quarterback that, it was pretty ugly. The Falcons absolutely got mauled by the Eagles in a pretty surprising upset. Jalen Hurts looked pretty good. Yeah, the Falcons have a terrible secondary, and Matty Ice looked lost, which hurt all the Falcons pass catchers, 21 of 35 for 164 and 0 touchdowns. Is the Eagles defense that much improved, or are the Falcons, namely Matt Ryan, in your burn book right now?
I think Matt Ryan has the potential to bounce back. The problem with the Falcons is there's no D in Falcons, and rightfully so, because they don't even bother to field one. And then on the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line didn't hold up well at all. So that's going to be a problem. Arthur Smith's a great coach. Matt Ryan's a great quarterback. I think he'll bounce back, but we may not quite see the totals we've seen the last couple of years.
Definitely disappointing. He's a guy that I was pumping up this offseason as someone that I think people were fading too much just because I thought they would be in a lot of negative game scripts, throwing a lot, but that was a little surprising. All right, next guy we're going to talk about is Brandon Ayuk. He was being drafted as a low-end wide receiver 2 after a very strong 2020 campaign in which he finished as wide receiver 26 for fantasy. However, he had 0 targets and 1 punt return against the Lions while dealing with a hamstring issue. Is a week 1 bagel enough to land Ayuk in your burn book? Like, what's going on with Kyle Shanahan? Good morning to everyone except someone named Kyle Shanahan today. It's very frustrating.
I made the cardinal sin of drafting someone from a Shanahan offense. I drafted Raheem Mostert, and we all saw how that went.
2 carries for 20 yards.
Right. Brandon Ayuk's actually deal with an injury. He'll be fine by midseason, but that's the reason for that. But the Kyle Shanahan offense, it goes different places every week. It's never predictable. It's not stable. So if you hit on him, congrats. But I just avoid that offense altogether outside of Kittle.
Yeah, super frustrating. I think Kyle Shanahan's in my burn book, not Ayuk. So hopefully there are better days ahead. All right, next guy we're going to talk about is Saquon Barkley. We knew it would be a slow start for Barkley, but he finished with just 10 carries for 26 yards. Is this what fantasy managers should expect at least early season, or is this Broncos run defense that strong?
I think it's both. Broncos run defense is that strong. And at the same time, Saquon Barkley is still coming back from an injury. It's going to take him a while to get back to form. So if I were you, I would wait 2 to 3 weeks and then buy low on Saquon Barkley, and then you should profit in the second half of the season.
For sure. I think that he is a very good buy low target. There's a lot of guys that I think are good buy low targets, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, definitely a good guy that people should go out and get. Even I think, like, if you still believe in Aaron Rodgers, I think all the Packers guys are going to be really good buy lows at this point. I, of course, have to ask you about one Broncos player in this segment. It's going to be Cortland Sutton. He saw just 3 targets and recorded 1 catch for 14 yards. Should managers panic about his usage and health moving forward? Like, do you think that his usage was due to his health or game script or chemistry? What's your take on that?
I think it's all the above. I think it's a combination of those things, early on. I think that now that Judy's hurt and he's going to be out, like we said, for the next probably 2 months, and then have lingering issues for the rest of the season after that, Cortland's got to step up. He has to step up and become that guy. So I think by default, he's going to get a higher target share going forward. Hopefully he's able to do things with it. I think KJ Hamler might be the biggest beneficiary of the Judy injury, but we're going to see a lot of KJ, Tim Patrick, and Cortland Sutton going forward.
Awesome. Okay, that will do it for the burn book. Our next segment is called Full Send, or That's Cap, which is sort of opposite of the last one. I'm going to give you 5 players whose values are on the rise after a strong week 1. I want to know, are you sending it on this player? That's kind of a ski term. Or is that cap? Cap means it's not real. Sorry, I didn't want to just assume you didn't know that, but a lot of people don't know that. So our first player is going to be Jameis Winston. So if I told you one quarterback in this game threw 2 interceptions and 0 touchdowns, and the other quarterback threw 5 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. I'm pretty sure you'd think these names were swapped, right? But in all seriousness, Winston looked really good with a decimated receiving core, and it was a pretty different Winston than we're used to. He attempted just 20 passes, leaned heavily on the run game. Are you going full send on Winston as the Saints QB this season, or do you think that's a little cap?
Well, he's the Saints quarterback for sure. I'm not going full send on 5 touchdowns every week, but I think I think he'll get more yardage than he got in that game because he didn't really do that much in terms of yardage. So
yeah, that was super surprising.
That's because they were short.
Yeah, I was super surprised about the yardage for sure.
Yeah, and they were shorthanded with receivers as well. So I think he's going to be. I'm going to go ahead and make that a full send.
Awesome. I'm very happy to see Winston as the QB1 there. I was just this whole offseason QB competition with him and Hill was very frustrating, especially as a fantasy person. So love to see that. All right. Next guy we're going to talk about is Melvin Gordon. So lots of fantasy managers drafted Williams before Gordon. I know you did not, but Gordon finished with 14 touches for 118 all-purpose yards and a touchdown, while Williams had 15 carries for 41 scrimmage yards. Should managers go full send on Gordon this year as the RB1 in this offense?
Well, he is the RB1, but I would probably sell high here. It feels like a fulcrum moment for this. And we did see Javonte had some close ones. He was close to breaking there and maybe making a little bit of hay. It's still going to be a 60-40 split with Melvin getting the majority of the touches. And they want that because when he leaves after this year, they wanted to sign a big deal so he can factor the compensatory formula. But overall, probably not going full send on Melvin Gordon this one. No, I've been his biggest fan, but I'm probably selling high here.
Fair enough. I think the moral of the story is that everyone should be listening to you about, their usage and stuff like that from camp. All right. Another Shanahan, Elijah Mitchell. So Trey Sermon was a healthy scratch, which was very surprising. Raheem Mostert saw 2 carries for 20 yards. After the game, Shanahan said Mitchell simply beat out Sermon this offseason. Like, I don't know what to think of that. I don't know if Shanahan is just like the king of the smoke screen. If that literally means that like next week, like Sermon is going to be the RB1, but I don't know what is your take on this? Do you think that that's true? Like, do you trust Shanahan, or is trusting any 49ers running back pretty much cap?
I think trusting any 49ers player outside of Kittle is pretty much a dicey endeavor. If it were me, I mean, like what'll happen is we're all going to split into Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon camps, and then JaMychal Hasty is going to be the running back next week. So, I just I avoid the Niners altogether. I made the mistake. I drafted Mostert like an idiot. I've already paid my price for it in week 1. I'm moving on.
Very, very frustrating. Yeah, there was like that one game last year where I was just so frustrated. Kyle Shanahan said like McKinnon had tired legs or something like that. So everyone went out and picked up JaMychal Hasty, and JaMychal Hasty had like 2 carries, and Jerick McKinnon had 29 carries. Super frustrating. Don't trust any 49ers not named Kittle. All right. Next guy we're going to talk about is Jamar Chase. So Chase's ADP plummeted after a rough preseason and some rumors that he couldn't catch an NFL ball. Obviously, that was pretty unfounded. He caught 5 passes for 101 yards and a touchdown and looked like the team's best receiver. Are you going full send on the Burrow Chase connection, or do you think it's a little bit capped given the Vikings' permeable defense?
I think that Vikings defense is horrible. I got a chance to see it up close and personal when the Broncos scrimmaged with them. I'm not buying this one yet. Let me see it a couple of more weeks. I always thought that Chase was better than what people were saying right before the week started, but I don't think he's as good as he was yesterday. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's one that's easy to overreact to for sure. So I think we have to see it a few more games. All right, the last guy that we're going to talk about is Rob Gronkowski. So he will finish at least top 3 this week. He is currently the top tight end for fantasy. He recorded 8 catches for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. This Bucs offense is fire. Are you going full send on Gronk as a tight end 1 season long, or was one shootout against a subpar Dallas secondary cap?
Yeah, he's not tight end one for the season. I mean, that's going to wind up being Kelsey, and we all know why. But I think Gronk can vulture some touchdowns. He's not really going to be good for much yardage week to week, but I think on weeks where he gets in there and gets the end zone, that'll be fun. He probably finishes in the top 7 tight ends. Overall, I expect guys like Waller and Kelsey and Logan Thomas, to continue to kind of show out. So I'm not buying him as a tight end one, but I am buying him as an every week starter.
Awesome. All right. We have 8 more rapid fire questions, and we will get you back to doing all things Broncos. So question 13 is, name one player you just can't quit or you always find yourself making excuses for. So for me, that is Joe Mixon, which, by the way, it is Mixon season right now. I am very excited. I have a lot of exposure to him. So yeah, I'm glad that I went 3 years making excuses for Joe Mixon.
That's a good one. I'm trying to think of one that I really have to make excuses for. Man, I'm trying to think. There's got to be somebody that I draft every year, and that I just wind up being mad that I drafted. I'm trying.
Yeah, either you just say it's just their bad quarterback play, or he's always injured and it's not his fault, or it's the O-line and it's not him.
It's probably Jarvis Landry. Not that he's terrible. Jarvis Landry isn't bad at all, but that's always the guy that I draft, and I plug him in. He's going to get all the receptions, and then he does, but it's for 40 yards, and so you're upset. But so he's Jarvis Landry's probably the guy I'm always making excuses for.
Fair enough. Yeah, it was. I actually don't remember how his stat line ended up, but obviously, if OBJ ends up missing any more time, that was certainly concerning that he was such a late scratch. So Landry could definitely have a lot more value. All right, predict when the Broncos will win their next Super Bowl.
Oh man, 2 years from now.
2 years from now. All right, 2023 Broncos Super Bowl. Putting it on the board. Give us one Broncos player who you think is underrated for fantasy.
KJ Hamler. With Jerry Jeudy out, he's got to get a lot more work. He's got the speed. He dropped the long touchdown pass that would have put him right up there yesterday. He's going to get a lot more work with Jeudy out. KJ Hamler's the most underrated.
Awesome. All right. Speaking of underrated players, was Joe Flacco ever elite? Yes or no?
No. He had unless you count that one 6-game playoff run and all that stuff, you count those 6 games, that sample is elite, sure. But other than that, no.
Fair enough. Will any Broncos player finish in the top 5 at their respective positions for fantasy this year?
Ooh, that's a good one. Noah Fant. Noah Fant has the potential to be able to do that.
Yeah, love that chemistry with Teddy. All right. We kind of talked about this. It's looking like, Judy's going to miss a lot of time. How much do you think this benefits Cortland Sutton? Are you putting him as a fantasy or wide receiver 2? And which of the Broncos receivers should managers prioritize on the waiver wire this week?
Well, I would say Cortland's probably a wide receiver 3 until he shows that he's beyond the health issues and everything else and gets that chemistry down with Teddy Bridgewater. And I think KJ Hamler's the one you need to prioritize. Tim Patrick's going to be the third down guy, contested catch guy, but KJ is going to be the playmaker. So he's got to be able to take the top off, and he's got to secure those catches on the deep ball. We saw him get free yesterday. So I think KJ Hamler's the one to prioritize.
Awesome. I may quote you on that for my waiver wire article. Give me one player who you think is primed for a big fantasy season next year.
Next year, Javonte Williams, Broncos running back. He'll have the backfield to himself at that point. And that was always the plan. The plan was always bring him in, get him up to speed, platoon him with Melvin Gordon, let Melvin Gordon have a big season, then Melvin walks and Javonte takes over next year. So that if you're looking for a Broncos player, that'd be the one.
Yeah, I think that'll be super exciting next year. All right. How many attempts do you think it would take you to make an extra point?
I could probably do that in 2 or 3 attempts. An extra point. Yeah, and an extra point I can do. Anything, we went out there and practiced that not too long ago. I could do an extra point. Anything beyond that, yeah, no, I'm worthless. And it's going to go so low. It's going to it is not going to go upright and everything. It's going to go so low, it cruise a foot over the bar. But that would be the extent of my kicking prowess, and no rush whatsoever. I could not have anybody rushing me while I did it.
You do it in full pads.
Yeah, I could do it pads.
It's funny because I've asked this for a few people, but you are the first one that's obviously actually tried it. So that is very, very cool. All right. Finally, if you had one cardinal rule to tell someone getting into fantasy this season, what would it be?
Don't. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Follow you for all the tips and hints and everything else, right?
Yes, definitely follow both of us on Twitter.
Don't follow me. My Twitter feed's a dumpster fire. In fact, unfollow me at Allbright NFL.
You are always, I think it's so funny. You definitely get into it with a lot of people on Twitter, which is awesome. I love watching it. All right. Well, that will do it for our rapid fire round of 21 questions with our esteemed guest, Benjamin Allbright. Ben, I can't thank you enough for joining me in this insanely busy time. Please tell everyone where they can find you this NFL season.
Well, we already said you can unfollow me at Allbright NFL on Twitter. If you like me taking selfies, I have an Instagram as well. That's really all that's been good for me because I suck at social media. So,
I'm still waiting on that TikTok, by the way.
Right. I got to get that TikTok, do a little dance and all that kind of stuff. What else? You can Broncos Country Tonight, the radio show. We're actually moving up an hour. We're going to be starting at 6 p.m. starting next week. So you want to look forward to that on KOA and iHeart and you can download the podcast on all the Spotify's and all that stuff.
Awesome. Go download, rate, review, subscribe to Broncos Country Tonight, and follow Ben or unfollow Ben. Thank you so much for coming on. As a reminder, Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon are here on the Fantasy Flex every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, giving you guys all the DFS waiver wire and rankings info you need to help you dominate your fantasy leagues. I will be back this Thursday and every Thursday from now on with my mailbag episode. Speaking of which, you should email any mailbag questions to mailbag@actionnetwork.com. Thanks again for listening. Please rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts. Download us wherever you'd like to listen, and we will see you next time on the Fantasy Flags presented by Prize Picks. Peace out, y'all.